Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia, and with me, as always, is the IT personnel. That is Jennifer Woolman. If you have ever had the experience of seeing her troubleshoot, all right, some IT issues, it is a sight to behold.
Yeah, it usually involves throwing the computer or the telephone. That's the level of my IT.
Love it.
I
Jennifer,
love
say
technology,
hi.
kind of. It's a total love-hate relationship.
I hear you.
Hi, everybody. And today we're super excited to have Sarina Ziv, who really is an IT expert, a tech queen, and she is the founder of Proofmark. And instead of me butchering everything, why don't you tell me a little bit about Proofmark, and then let's backtrack and get into a little bit more about you.
I'm so excited to be here and to share more about Proofmark, even though you guys have been part of our journey for the last few months already in our story. Proofmark is 2 years in the making. It actually came out of a conference where I gave a talk on what the future of AI scaling looks like for the economy at Nova Southeastern. And we just looked at past markets where synthetic entered the space, so polyester entering the material space. We also looked at the entertainment industry and how when that scaled with VHS, DVD, now streaming, what happened to authentic media essentially. And that talk ended up selling out, and it was just encouraging entrepreneurs and tech leaders to consider the offset of whatever AI brings to the market. Things that are not redundant and do not scale will also hold value. And in that same week, this was back in 2023, I received a piece of media for a fashion design that was clearly fake to me. And I was like talking to the person, do you realize this is not really a true item you can purchase? And there was a debate about it. So I went to my connection at Anthropic and I was like, what are you going to do in a couple of years when people can no longer discern what is real? And he was like, honestly, we're scaling synthetic generation, and I would be excited to advise you if you decide to tackle this problem. So that turned into a white paper. It turned into a unique IP and a product that has a team of almost 10 people now that are working diligently on it and tackling this problem of not being able to believe what you see in the media, if you will.
Perfect. Thanks for that overview. So tell us a little bit, give us some of your background, where you're from, how you ended up here in South Florida.
My background. So I have almost 20 years of experience working closely with product. In the beginning of my career, I worked more so on the data analyst and market research side. But for the last 10 years, I've worked closely with family offices. So whatever passion projects they have under their umbrella, whether it's fintech, social networks, ed tech, I'm a product leader who understands both the technical side as well as the business operations. So that's called a TPM. And that's primarily what I've been doing for the last 10 years and 5 years here in Florida. And I love it here because there's a huge crypto scene. Bitcoin conference obviously was hosted here multiple times. So there's an energy here. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in Israel, in Asia, in Europe, also on the West Coast. And I would say that Miami has an energy that I've never experienced elsewhere. It's kind of an infusion of things that are happening all over the world and processes that are happening all over the world, but the outcome is extremely unique to South Florida, I would say, and I'm excited to see the outcome of that over the next 5 years, because as you see, there are founders moving down here. Palantir just moved down here. I think it's a great time for Miami, and I'm so excited that Proofmark has its headquarters here too.
I love that. So tell me a little bit about, in addition to that original picture that you came across from the fashion industry, what are you seeing? What other, I imagine as you've been developing your company and your product, you've obviously started to attract more examples of issues that are coming up. Can you give us some idea of what you're seeing that could be a red flag for companies in terms of AI?
So honestly, this process has been a whirlwind for me. When we started with Proofmark, the concept was if there is a genuine model on the other side of the lens, if there is a photographer, hardware, a Canon camera, and a post-production process and editing, that piece of media has artifacts and also an inherently different value than something that's generated from nothing in a few seconds. So that was the working thesis of our company. So we're thinking long-term about NFT, and we've had interesting conversations with sporting team owners, athletes. It's been exceptional. That's really where I thought we were headed. But around the same time, because we've only been an incorporated company for a few months, really B2B came to us. So we've had a consultant for a top 3 law firm reach out to us with a legal quandary where there was a $25 million lawsuit, and they had forensic experts who were not able to discern whether or not media was real. So that's the kind of use case that was like, whoa, this is not what I thought we were going to get into. But as part of our IP, to understand whether or not media is authentic, we had to throw at it some unique tooling to understand if media is real or not. That has been really what has come at us over the last few months. And I'm excited to highlight the real estate space because I'm also I'm also a licensed with Avanti. I'm also a licensed agent with Avanti Way. And so I had a gut instinct that there's a market with real estate. The quality of it is that the MLS is almost like a ledger, if you will. Media follows property listings, sometimes over the lifespan of that individual property. And so it made sense to me that when there are people investing financial resources to capture that media and it's tied to a physical asset, there's something inherently unique about the media tied to property. So that was an instinct that we have been digging into and having high-level conversations about. And I honestly am excited to share what we've been discovering. I think it's explosive, and I would love it if this podcast broke this story because I do not see it unfolding in the media. So that was why I was most excited to come on your podcast today to highlight that. The first is that in terms of real estate itself, and as an agent who has sold off market, I think that an agent wants to use as many tools that are in their arsenal in order to succeed and make the sale. So this is not really to shed any shade on the process of using AI to make that sale happen. But we were asked to do a case study on how many pieces of media within active live listings may hold synthetic artifacts. And you might be surprised to know what that number came out to be for the Miami area as well as LA. And we'll touch on why LA matters in a moment. But how many MLS listings in terms of percentage would you say contain AI artifacts right now in Miami, do you think?
Just because there's a high rate of adoption, I think, among agents in this market, I would say that it is probably a high percentage or probably a higher percentage that people would assume.
And you're including like digital staging and stuff like that, as well as whole pictures that are created by AI, correct?
Absolutely. We just are looking at media uploaded for a listing. So
yeah.
I would say
at this moment, there's no way to discern when you are uploading whether or not this has been digitally altered and synthetically altered or not. So yes.
Which is interesting because if you look at the MLS or any of the other commercial listing platforms, there's a wide degree of quality in pictures, right? You'll see obvious professional photography, and then you'll see stuff taken with a cell phone. And my guess is on the MLS, you see more of it than you do on professional platforms, just because the professional platforms do offer professional photography services as well. So I would guess 40, probably 45%.
That's more, I was thinking probably 25 to 40 when we were asked to do the case study. Mostly I was concerned that there would be a reluctance to do so because it could harm trust with buyers. So my premise was tread carefully with the tooling, if you will. So that was what I had also suspected would be the case. And actually, this case study is now a couple weeks old, so this number could be higher. But you might be surprised to know that in Miami, over 80% of media on the MLS has been AI augmented. And this is a conversation that's not really unfolding in news outlets or really in any space that I'm familiar with, except these high level conversations. So over 80% in Miami and over 85% in LA. And the reason why that actually matters about LA is because SB 723 is a law that just went into effect in January of this year, where agents in California must indicate whether or not a piece of media for a given listing has been AI augmented or not. And over 85% of media listings in the LA MLS are augmented. So that means that they are outside of this new law. So it's really interesting because California is really setting the precedent for what other states might pursue in their listings. But I was shocked. We redid the study because it was just so alarming to me that I really couldn't fathom. And we can touch on what types of aspects of the media were augmented, because I think that's also an interesting conversation.
Yeah, my guess is that a lot of it had to do with the photographers themselves, right? So if they shoot on a cloudy day in Miami, well, we don't have cloudy days in Miami. We want it always to be sunshine, right? If there's an electrical wire or there's a garbage can in front or there's a car in front, that those might be removed or digitally, cut out. Is that along the line of what you saw?
Yeah.
That is the nature of the conversations that I had when I was interviewing other agents. They were like, I don't want to send a cameraman back at sunset when they were already there in the morning. So that was initially the premise that I too had. And I, again, was reluctant about the results until I attended a networking event a few weeks following that. And it's like our tooling is just always a few months ahead or a few weeks ahead of whatever the conversation starts to materialize. And I said this to a commercial agent about the case study, and he was like, his guess was 90% because that's how much he uses it. And he was like, Serena, you won't believe, I had a commercial listing that it had a hoarder that had been working in the space. And I just took those images and I uploaded them into Gemini, and I had the listing go. I've never had better business. I can make it twilight. I can make it dusk. I could do anything I want with this media, and I will make the sale. And his guess was 90% because that's how frequently he's using it. And around the same week, there was a post that went viral on LinkedIn where commercial investors were saying they were just sent a listing that looked incredible, and then when they sent out a scout, it was actually down to the studs. Like there was nothing there, so they had received misleading media, and then it just popped off. There were at least 4 other agents in that thread in the commercial investment space who were indicating that they were receiving augmented leads. Let's call it that. Let's coin our own terminology. Augmented leads that were misleading. So I think, like any space, there's different use cases where one, I'm a photographer or an agent where I want to capture that dusk moment. I've actually had a higher success range having a thumbnail that just looked a little bit more compelling on a purple sky, if you will. But what we also need to take into consideration is that these tools are slippery and they don't necessarily only change what you're asking to be changed in that moment. So one of the pieces of media we analyzed, maybe they had tried to change the night sky, but they had also changed the pool, the lighting within the pool. It hallucinates and it doesn't stay within certain parameters. It makes assumptions. These tools make assumptions, so it can change your media in ways that might not have been your intention. But also we have to consider that there are bad actors as well, and these tools are extremely powerful. And if there's an easier way to make money, that's been true even before the existence of AI generated media. So,
did you find any disclosures or disclaimers in the photos themselves when you were going through the study?
no, only the watermark for the individual agent or broker. Yeah, we did not find the Gemini marks or from Nanoman Pro or any other tooling. No.
Because I know in the MLS, at least in Miami, if you do virtual staging, you have to disclose that this was virtually staged, right?
Yeah, I'm speaking about the media that was not virtually staged. That was just a room that might have had a different view placed in the window, but there was no furniture. Or we've seen, now we can touch on some of those use cases. We've seen foundation that has been augmented foundation. So if there were cracks, electrical, like boxes, electrical infrastructure outside of the house, plumbing, that anything that's unsightly, we've definitely seen removed across more listings than I would ever have guessed, because it just changes maybe the aesthetic properties of the listing.
And Serena,
it's also a question. Yeah.
No, I wanted to ask just because so many thoughts go through my mind, but is the technology at a point where not only are you able to identify that a piece of media has been augmented through AI, but what kind of augmentation it has done? Do you have the ability to identify that, for example, it was simply turned from, from morning to night, or whether there are actual material things that have changed in the architecture of the space, for example?
Yeah, we are able to understand, and in unique ways, we are throwing at a lot of traditional forensic applications as well as new approaches and even physics on the media itself. So we're looking for these artifacts and we're able to discern the difference between deep fake, which is just using traditional tools that do not have AI generation qualities to them, and as well as AI generated or AI augmented hybridized media. So it's really, I think that was an interesting point for our company, was this premise of there's synthetic and there's authentic, and this notion that actually there's most media is now a hybridized aspect of both of these, and it can be a certain ratio of authentic and also synthetic quality. So we are able to understand.
That's amazing. I also think that because if you're thinking about the ecosystem and everyone who is involved in a listing, I would assume that when you hire a photographer to do the actual photography, they physically take the photos. From a business point of view, the photographer might run it through an AI program that will take care of the blemishes, balance the colors, deal with the aperture, make sure that it showcases. And then in some cases, I don't want to go back out there perhaps to take a picture at night. I already took the picture of the day. Now I'm going to turn it into dusk or nighttime and, turn on the lights, all those things. And so I would assume that this is not only an agent or broker led change, but even the vendors that you're hiring are using that in order to improve upon their work, their output.
I agree with that assessment. Even official actors, like, think about it, that what would go into a media release, that there would have to be hair and makeup and a green screen, also a background and a script, and there's all these aspects, post-production process, even not in a nefarious way, but official actors who are representing official messaging, they could also use these tools, and it's real, the message is real, but it's just so much more expedient and effective and cost saving to use these tools to get media across the public. And I think when it matters the most is when money is involved, because if a transaction is going to happen, you need to have high trust. So I think especially in the commercial space, if you are an investor and you have, before you invest additional resources and talent to go and scout a location, it would be in your best interest to use a tool like Proofmark to better understand what's going on in that property, whether it's off market.
What about with video? I mean, today I was watching somebody that he did a whole video of himself through AI, and it was uncanny. I mean, he looked real. It would be hard to tell the difference. And I'm not saying that's wrong, because a lot of people are using it to convey messages over and over, to become more productive, to have a more personal touch to like an email or whatever, without having to film every single time, like when you have the flu and you really want to send out an email, but you're not looking your best. So how are you seeing that, and where's the balance, right, between going through and saying everything is AI? Because I mean, it's very close to everything already, having, based on your 2 studies, right, having some type of AI augmentation. So what's kind of the balancing line between what is okay, AI augmentation, versus, to Fernando's point earlier, you change from dawn to dusk, or you change a gray sky to a blue sky, versus the view out the window is a brick wall and I make it look like it's oceanfront?
I think it's a really important question. The truth is that my entire life I've seen media hybridized. If it was airbrushing or other advanced tooling that was used to make things more aesthetic. So I don't think that in itself is wrong. The issue is that we don't have 100% control over the tooling. So you might, again, like I said, there's a slippery slope of what the outcome actually is in the tooling's results. So you might just want to change the sky, but you also change the pool. And I think it's not a question about whether or not these tools are going to be used anymore. They're in play. It's happening without oversight. But at the same time, for trust and for the infrastructure of trust, it's essential that users know what they're.
Yeah. And what else did you find other things while you were doing your study and comparing those 2 markets?
So like other use cases of where, I know it's very fascinating, terrifying.
Yeah.
But we want to operate in a space where the utility of these tools have a place and the benefits as well. So our engineers like to say AI augmentation, it's like when you patch a wall, since we're talking about real estate and properties.
Yeah.
You can have the best master level patch done, and still when you run your hand across it, there will be artifacts of different kinds, whether it's the texture or slightly raised, or maybe the shading of the coloring in different lights depending on the time of day or the angle you're looking at it. So it will never be 100% as it was. And so that is the philosophy that guides Proofmark's model. Essentially, once a piece of media has been changed, it has inherent qualities. It's almost reached the point, because at the pixel level, you can generate from nothing. So traditional forensics would look at the area where pixels may have been manipulated, and it would leave artifacts there. So it's a shifting landscape to try to think outside the box. But the metaphor of the wall, which is not my own, it came from our team. It's the best that I've heard. Is like, think about all the things that go into media, in its metadata, in the physics of the media, in the pixels and watermarks that are in the media, both visible and invisible. So when you take all of these things into consideration, there are still artifacts that tell a story, and that's what Proofmark is doing. And as far as other use cases,
it's an interesting dynamic, because when you've been doing this for such a long time, you recognize that there are people that can walk into a space and immediately envisioned it to be different than what it is. They see the potential, they automatically have that. And then you realize that not everybody has that ability. That is not innately in every single human being. And sometimes when you're presenting a property, you want to present both the reality of what it looks like today, but also to convey a potentiality, right? And the media allows you to do that. And now, because it's so accessible, because before this explosion of AI, people would send it out to, you know, experts that would be able to do that with photos, and that would take time, money. Now it's so accessible that you could do it so quickly. So I wonder, from your perspective, looking at it from so many different points of view, is the solution, more disclosure, number one, of, identifying that the media that you're presenting has been augmented by AI, and maybe also presenting the original piece of media so that people can understand this is what it is today and this is what it could potentially be.
Absolutely agree that guardrails are necessary and that disclosure is key. So we at Proofmark, we watermark with a visible watermark, but it's not necessary for our technology. So actually what happens is you can either analyze a piece of media, or you could say, I own this media and I want to have provenance over this piece of media, even though I'm going to use it elsewhere. And so what that looks like is it's uploaded, we analyze and ensure that it meets a certain threshold of authenticity. Then we tokenize it, we vectorize it, and we understand it like a digital fingerprint. So that piece of media could be cropped, it could have certain edits done to it, and we will still know that the source, the original, is the one that you uploaded into our ledger. So that is a way that you could begin to have legal recourses over media, track media over the internet, and say, it's in a ledger, at least it's original to me. And that was because long term we were thinking about NFT. So you have to have originality in order to go there. But that is still true of our technology. Just the analysis piece has become much more important and crucial right now because there are no guardrails, as these tools have been shipping these incredible products. They're incredible. And I don't see them only in a negative light. I think it's yin yang. It's like we still, just as we have polyester, that's 60% of the market more, especially after fast fashion. Made different styles more accessible to consumers. There's still a market for leather, for silk, for cotton. And I believe that the same will be true for authentic media. I don't know what that future ultimately looks like, but every market where synthetic has entered, authentic still had a place. There's a reason why you pay a premium to see a show on Broadway, and it's because there's no two shows that are ever alike. And it's a unique experience that will never be repeated. So I believe the same will be true of media, but how that ultimately unfolds, we're in flight. It's happening with or without the presence of hard-hitting journalism, which I wish we saw more of when it comes to these tools, because there's an absolutely clear upside when you think about using AI for your business. You can have lead generation, you can have content instantly, and you don't have to put those resources into everything. So it makes sense, but I think the conversation around guardrails is equally as important.
And what I know, we spoke a little bit about like documents and IDs because we had an issue at a title company at closing where the ID, the driver's license, looked real. It had all of the correct markings and they were close to closing, and something just felt off to somebody about the deal itself. And they were able to find that the ID and the buyer was a total fake. So how would Proofmark be able to help something like that? Or you and I spoke about, people do a lot of rentals through, short-term rental platforms, or they rent through other leasing platforms for property or something sight unseen. And then they get to a foreign country and guess what? That address and those pictures don't exist, or uploading of pictures that don't relate to a given address also on listing platforms. These are all things that we see. How can Proofmark help bring confidence back to platforms, because I do feel like with the lack of authenticity in so many things, and the more these stories get out where somebody bought something sight unseen and thought the pool was, a rectangle and it's really a kidney shape, or they went to an industrial park and it turns out that, what they were going to use as a yard has a huge FPL transformer back there that they now have to try to see if they can get moved. So how do you see Proofmark going beyond just the individual user and going bigger onto like platforms to give credibility back? Because people aren't going to stop searching, right, online necessarily. But when you lose credibility, these people have trusted, residential buyers have trusted the listing platforms for forever. Same thing with commercial practitioners. They've trusted the listing platforms. But now if they find out that AI is materially affecting the information that they're getting, right? And I go to the material fact, not the coloring and lighting.
Right.
How do you guys fit in, or how do you guys see Proofmark help bring credibility back, even though it might not be authentic, 100% authentic?
That's a great question, but I had multiple answers as you were highlighting different aspects of this problem space, different use cases came to mind. And I will just say that whatever I'm sharing today, I don't have an NDA in any sense. Like I can freely share it, except it is somewhat terrifying to share. But I will say that we had a demo with an insurance company that they hired and fully onboarded a North Korean actor into their company, and they had the government involved once they discovered what had happened, and to try they're taking steps to try to understand how they can prevent this from happening in the future. So that person from North Korea, which when I heard this use case, I was like, you're kidding. Like I just can't fathom that a tool that especially set out to try to be an NFT play. I was like,
it's what? A Tom Clancy novel.
We're happy to do a demo, but so essentially what had happened was that the person had stolen an identity of a real individual and was using deepfake technology to change the nature of their face when they were on call with team members. So they were bypassing security measures, cyber security measures. Proofmark is not a cybersecurity company, but we are a deep tech company. So we can be used alongside cybersecurity tools. And what that would look like is use your background check. By all means, we are not replacing that. We are not replacing people. We're just another tool in your arsenal to combat deepfake and bad actors, honestly. That would mean that if you did a background check for tenants, you would also run their passport or whatever ID they had provided through our tool and just seen really quickly if the head had been changed, the headshot. So you have to consider that bad actors use multiple tools when they're committing acts of fraud. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all tool to combat this and be a guardrail either. So that's what Proofmark offers. And I don't know if that answers the entirety of your question, but that was the first use case that came to mind, was that we are not cybersecurity, but we're just another tool in your infrastructure to help guide your decision-making, your human decision-making, because we're not able to see at the pixel level or understand all these different aspects of the media that we're looking at any longer. And also, I will just say that I'm on the board of my own HOA, and we had a situation unfold just this week between two owners where there had been some damage done to the property of one, and that homeowner had media to prove what it had looked like before that damage, and then the other homeowner had media to prove with a timestamp that it didn't look that way. And it wasn't until I raised on the conversation, you realize that I am the founder of a company. I'm a co-founder of a company that understands uniquely augmented media, that the entire situation suddenly moved forward. and one side dropped their claim. So I won't speak too in depth about it, but it occurred to me that if an actor thinks that there is no recourse, if there is no tool that can catch them, they're going to behave very differently than if they understand that there is tooling. When it comes to real estate, as an example, as soon as people understand that there is something that can determine whether or not there has been augmentation, I think we would see that number 81% go down dramatically. But that's just a theory. But I've seen it in real time, and I can only imagine. Honestly, my takeaway was how many conversations right now, insurance claims, situations within HOAs. We're a very tiny HOA, so how many situations like that are unfolding right now where it's just like he said, she said, because the media no longer proves as it did. It's just really interesting, and we aren't really seeing that conversation. We see, like, did this billionaire really attend this frat party? And it's all fun and games and playful until you realize, like, receipts can be faked and ID can be faked, and we have our taxes due imminently in just 2 weeks now. How many small businesses or businesses that are operated with foreign members are going to submit receipts that are fraudulent? I mean, it's a real question. So I think we're only at the precipice of how large scale this problem really is. But I think that real estate has a unique positioning because it is so closely aligned media with the actual asset. Also, I would say that there are those here, even in the Miami world, in the crypto space, who would like to see real estate on chain. And that would mean the removal of agents, brokers, title, mortgage. Like, there's a lot of players who are absolutely integral to the real estate process and who own culpability in this process in the transaction itself. But the unique thing about Proofmark and the media is that it follows the property, and it can be used at the point of sale. It can be used in the appraisal process. It can be used in the underwriting as well. So I think rather than replacing people, again, we are deep tech that would work alongside humans and existing tools. It feels better to be in a position where you're not trying to automate work that's done by people.
So you're talking about authenticity and trust, which are two, if not the most important pillars of building relationships, right? And we often speak about how important it is to understand that with all the technology that is at disposal, the most important that we have is to build relationships. That this is always going to be a relationship building, business. So the question that I have for you is, keeping in mind the importance of authenticity, keeping in mind the importance of trust, but also equally keeping in mind the incredible power that is at the disposal of agents, brokers, business owners, and seeing all the issues that you have really done a deep dive on. What are your recommendations on how to use AI properly to be able to really augment, for lack of a better word, the ability to provide a great service while maintaining authenticity and trust?
It's a fabulous question. I am a technophile. I love technology. I'm not one that's like standing at the side of the road with a sign like this is Armageddon because of these tools. I think this is the most important question that's been asked. So I want people to feel encouraged that there are steps that they can take.
Sure. Every day I encounter people. I see diversification in the use of AI tools. It used to be that everybody would speak only about Chat GPT, and now I'm seeing people that are really diversifying and looking at Claude. They're looking at all these other different kinds of tools. I'm sorry, I know I'm leaving a lot of them out because there are a lot. There is a mixture of excitement and there is a mixture of the realization that there is a learning curve and that you get to be very creative in how you use it and you get to increase productivity. There's so many of those things. And, but in the between all that, I'm sure there are things that are not being considered, right? Especially if you're a good actor, meaning that you have good intentions, you're just trying to learn how to utilize something. I think one way or the other, we're all going to school again, right? Because this is a new world. So I don't know if that helps you, but basically, at least the way I think about it is that it is not laziness, right? That to say that you're using an AI tool, right? You cannot, that cannot take the place of your experience and you doing your task and your job. In other words, you have to verify the output. You have to make sure that the information that you put on there is correct, and that people shouldn't feel limited or shouldn't feel embarrassed to disclose to someone that you're working with that you're utilizing an AI tool, right? And so that's where, in my mind, that's where we can lose sight of authenticity and trust. It's when you are passing on that work as if it was your own without saying, this is in collaboration with. In other words, without my input, without my perspective, we couldn't get to this output. But this is a tool that I'm using to get to that output.
What I thank you so much for that opportunity to also have some time to think, but see another side to the question. Like I said, I am a technophile. I believe strongly that tools improve livelihoods and lives, and I'm not one to sound an alarm like doom and gloom. I use AI tooling. There's no shame in using AI tooling. What I wish that we heard more use cases around is using AI tools outside the box rather than just like one-to-one automate something that a human is already doing. So what that looks like to me is one of my family offices that is one of my clients still to this day. They are operating a nonprofit, and I advocated that they use AI to be a listening agent. So they have qualitative concerns that they have always wanted to track, but there's no human that's going to listen to every email, listen to every, user feedback, conversation that unfolds, interaction on the website, and seek out those KPIs, those qualitative KPIs. That's not something that a human did. But this client now has the tools and the means to actually achieve that, track it, and even have that as part of their quarterly updates. Like, these are the qualitative KPIs that we met, and we know because we had an AI agent that was listening for these KPIs for us. The way that I use AI as a business owner, I will have a recording of a conversation, which a lot of people do now. They record, create notes, but I don't ever look at those notes or use them or move them into that would be like what a human does, who is your secretary or your personal assistant. If it was a high value conversation, I will say, okay, let's talk about that conversation. What did I miss? What was the most important aspect that was raised in that conversation? So basically, I had a CIA operative on the call with me who can now dissect this word choice maybe implies X, this word choice implies Y. That's not a human task. This is something that is highly qualitative with an immense amount of data. So this is not one-to-one. So I'm actively seeking out use cases as an owner. How can I become exponential where I'm not just limited to my human abilities? That's different than replacing a human, which still has human abilities. So I caution that, and I see Proofmark as a guardrail and a tool that, okay, you as a human, your eyes cannot look at the pixel level. So here's a tool that empowers you and makes you more, it makes your business more exponential, that you have information without even going and seeing a property, for example. You have information about your tenants without, you don't have a CIA agent on your staff, but you have these tools that now empower you. And that's really what I want the future to look like. I am a parent myself of 2 teenagers, understand and believe that these tools empower us. And whenever I hear about a use case of fraud, I'm looking for the alternative. Well, how is tech solving this? To the yin to the yang. And that is what Proofmark is here to do. It came to us. It's not what we set out to do. We have entertainment. We have someone who worked on Loki and major Disney productions on our staff, and he's coming at it from the entertainment and media lens, and he and I have conversations almost every day where we're like, we want to do something fun, we want to do something more in that space, but if our tool can help in this problem space, this extremely terrifying problem space, then we're here to do it, because I don't see many tools available that give this unique approach to understanding what's happening with media. I will say that every day it's interesting, because it doesn't matter if we're working with a potential client and we're demoing for their unique problem, like identification, or it's a family office or a VC. Everyone is bringing unique information to us, not with an NDA, and we just step away and we're like, wow, that's incredible. We just discovered last week that in some states, up to 75% of appraisals happen without a human. Just the fact, first of all, that I'm privy to that information, and also understanding, here I am with my limited knowledge, thinking about buying things sight unseen, which I have done as an investor, and how can I translate that use case to the general market so that everyone understands the inherent dangers when purchasing property, but understanding that the appraisal can happen without a human. Even if it's a residential transaction and you did go and see the property physically, I was really stunned by that, and I'm an agent. So the problem is it's very large. I suspect that we will not be the only player in the space, but right now we are the first to market, and I'm excited to empower agents to have a tool. There is a free tier where you can analyze a couple of pieces of media every month, and then we have different tiers up from there. But I think, at least for the free tier, if you are in a situation with your neighbor trying to determine what something looked like, you have a free resource.
Great. Well, thank you. We are so excited for you, Serena. And I love the fact that, a simple presentation at, Nova ended up coming to you, as you said, in different fits and pieces, to the point where you were able to connect all of the dots that were coming at you and see a problem and come up with a solution to try to address that issue. So kudos to you for doing that.
For sure. And I would say also, what I love about this conversation is there is clearly a lot of thought leadership here that is happening, and also, a great lesson for business owners out there, regardless of what you're developing, is the fact that you need to have flexibility. You have to understand where the marketplace sometimes takes you in a direction that is unforeseen, that you were not perhaps envisioning, but that now you created something that is going to be useful in ways that you did not imagine. That's part also of what's amazing about the entrepreneurial journey, right? Is that you really don't know exactly where you're going to end up, and you have to have the wherewithal to be uncomfortable and to also be open-minded to look at new opportunities. So we thank you tremendously for sharing your time today and giving us this glimpse and this great information about your report on the listings as well.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I want to state also that I think the incredible thing about these tools is the information that they provide. I've had conversations where, like, if we're having a negotiation to onboard an employee or something like that, everyone can come to the table with more equal information about what should happen. And not always, sometimes it will withhold, that these tools will withhold if you don't ask or you don't have insider information. But for the most part, people can come to the conversation, come to the table between two chairs, and have a greater understanding of what they should be talking about to self-advocate or to have an optimal result. And I think the aspect that's missing, and what I'm understanding is becoming more important than authenticity, is originality. And every human has a unique, original experience that AI does not have. And it's almost like, up until this moment, my team is not on this call with me. It almost looks like, okay, it's Serena. But the truth is, we are multiple people with original, unique experiences in AI in entertainment, in physical goods space, in commercial real estate. So we are bringing our unique perspectives, our original perspectives into the conversation. And that is becoming more important than the knowledge of how to do X, Y, Z, because that is what AI gives you. So essentially everyone can be a CEO, everyone can be a founder or an entrepreneur today, but it's your own unique and original background that is the differentiator. And I would just say to all agents or anyone listening to this podcast, that is your most valuable asset. And we meet with PR firms right now to try to tell the story of Proofmark. And they're like, oh, you build a story around the CEO. It's like, first of all, everything that's been true up until this point doesn't necessarily need to be what's true going forward. The past informs the present, but these tools are creating different infrastructure moving forward. We are an Avenger team. We all bring our unique experiences. And so if you hear something in the media about AI unfolding, you should talk to X. If you hear something in the product space or in real estate, you should talk to Y. And so I just really want to underscore how important originality is, because these tools aggregate. So that means they are the average of the human experience. And that is not original. And that is not unique. It's average. It's better than not knowing what you don't know and trying to tackle a conversation, but don't underscore how important being original is in your business.
I love that.
I love that.
That's a perfect place to end.
Absolutely. So you heard it here, folks. Thank you again for joining us on this episode of Between Two Chairs, this very special episode. And you heard it here first. Be original. Be authentic, be yourself. Nobody else can do that for you. And until next time, from Jennifer and I and Serena, thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye. Say bye, Jennifer.
Bye.